Woohoo! What a what a whirlwind. I'm so happy to be here with all of you to talk about the five emotions that stop success. And before I tell you what they are, I'll tell you a little about me. I am Rati Gorfine, and my business is Creative Calling Coaching. And I never thought I'd be a business and career coach for people with ADHD. I mean, I actually have a very early memory of lying in my crib. Okay. I mean, I don't know how many months old I was, but I was looking up and there was a streak of sunlight and there were dust particles dancing in it. And I was fascinated by the dust particles. And I know one thing for sure, as I had a sense my life was just beginning. I was not thinking when I grow up I'm going to be a coach for people with ADHD. No, by the time I was 4, I was going to be a famous actress. I remember being on a rocking horse, and my mother had let some friend's kid babysit me. Turned out she was schizophrenic. So she said, jump into my arms. And I jumped and she stepped back and I went and I lost a tooth. And that turned out to be a recurring theme in life. While I was on that rocking horse, by the way, what I was fantasizing about was being in a parade, waving at everyone. And I realized in that moment, I am going to be in front of people. Well, that much is true. And here I am. So, the 5 emotions, you wonder. Well, they came out of the awareness I developed over the course of 15 years of psychoanalysis. I'm wondering about my lipstick, as you can tell. And once during my treatment, several years in, I had a dream. I was in the mezzanine of an enormous theater, big Broadway theater with a red velour everywhere and the crystal chandelier. And I was the only person in the theater, which is a little odd. I remember I was in the front row of the mezzanine and I looked down, and on the stage there was a very violent scene from my past being acted out. I was being pulled by my hair, as happens, And what struck me was I felt no fear. I was peaceful. I was just watching. And when I told my therapist about this dream, he said, "That's it. You are the woman in the mezzanine." Now, in the book I wrote, The 5 Emotions That Stop Success, this mezzanine is a recurring theme. It's an exercise I teach you in order to separate from and examine whatever's hijacking you. Now, the 5 emotions. The first one is shame, and the antidote to shame is that very thing. What I am describing, I know you all recognize, is separation, witness consciousness, metacognition. I am not what happens to me. And so in the course of my teaching about the 5 emotions, I will talk about the emotion, and then I will talk about the antidote. So there are 5 emotions, and they really function in kind of a cyclical way. One, I think shame is the big kahuna, the root emotion, all right? And then we have grandiosity. Just a minute, I'm moving my clock where I can see it. Grandiosity is the flip side of shame. Okay, it's shame turned inside out, but it's still shame. Grandiosity is like this luminescent, diaphanous bubble of delusion. And that you're in that bubble going, no one else is like me. I don't have to play by the rules. There's a lot of entitlement, contempt for others. Contempt is a surefire sign of shame. And at the least criticism, that bubble gets popped and you do a downward spiral into shame. I will, as a side note, say that grandiosity is a huge component of narcissism. All right. And narcissism is all about what matters is me. No one else is like me. And what matters is me, my feelings, my outcomes, right? So we have shame, grandiosity. Out of that comes two forms of envy. And envy is this feeling of, hey, to quote the great performance artist, Patricia Scanlon. Oh, the name came back to me. Thank you, God. She had a great show. She had a giant coffee cup, and she would drink out of it. And there was one line that stayed with me my whole life that I wish I'd written, and it was, that's my shirt you're wearing, and that's my life you're living. That's envy. Envy. The feeling that someone else has what you should have had, that you are entitled to. And man, doesn't it get triggered all the time? Here we are on Facebook, and you see everybody having a great time, and the obligatory like, it's kind of like a little tiny virtue signal, like, oh, wonderful, that's wonderful. And then somebody's having a hard time. It's possible, especially if there's someone who has a lot of success and you're envious of them. It's possible, if you haven't done your work, that you're experiencing a little Schadenfreude. So that's, Facebook is a great place to work on your stuff, because you're going to notice your reactions to different posts, okay? So that's comparative envy. I said there were two types, and there are. The second type is what I call eroticized envy. It's interesting because it's a refuge. You know how you fall in love with an actor or a movie star, or maybe even somebody's friend. You just think they're gorgeous or whatever, and you just have to know everything about them, and you start Googling them and stalking, kind of cyber stalking to learn about them. You just want to literally get inside their skin. You just can't. You want to know everything about them. You watch every television series they're in or whatever it is. That getting inside their skin, that's erotic. Eroticism is about connection. And it's all done with mirrors. Basically, what you're falling in love with is something that you don't realize you already have, or you don't have the courage to realize in your life. And so you take refuge. It's a great distraction. It's not particularly productive. It's not benign either, because time is passing. And your life is passing. And you're not out there making the change and living the purpose you are here to live. So that's envy. And next we have a very pernicious emotion. Many of my clients deal with this. As I said, I deal with creative professionals. Well, maybe I didn't. I said I deal with people with ADHD. I work with people. I deal with them. Yeah, a lot to deal with. I work with people with ADHD, but they are particularly in the creative professions most of the time. So they are creatives with ADHD, which is a double whammy. Boredom. Here's the thing. And you start working on a project, and frankly, just think of creativity as being resourcefulness or imagination, okay? Uh, Inventiveness, industriousness. That's creativity, right? So let's say you're working on a book, you're working on a project, something, you have an inspiration for that project, and it almost pulls you by the throat. It's that epiphanic moment when you come up with something. And you're soaring. You're soaring. It's writing itself, right? But then you get to the stage of revision. You get to the stage where you start to show it, hopefully to people you trust. Okay, that's another thing. Don't let the wrong people stomp around in your secret garden, as a coach of mine used to say. Some people don't know what they're looking at. Now, I talk about that in the book I wrote about the 5 emotions a lot. There are critics and there are connoisseurs. Connoisseurs know what they're looking at. So, that said, you start to get feedback on your baby. And you take it to heart, and you start to see what they mean, and you start to rework the project. And it's work. It really is. It's work. And that initial frisson is gone, It's like the honeymoon's over. And you start getting distracted. You start, binging Netflix or, going to the refrigerator, or basically you're bored. You're bored because you have lost touch with your inspiration, with your why. And this is where boredom is really dangerous. I basically think it's a crisis of meaning making, of lacking a sense of purpose. And when you get into that revision stage, you may start to lose that sense of purpose, start to get bored. And because that's about a loss of something being meaningful, it's very easy to say, listen, I'm bored with this. How the heck do I expect anybody else to care? And that's when you risk not finishing it. Moving on to the next thing, dropping it. And then the world will never have it. So the final emotion, and again, you may notice that shame is a thread that moves through all of these. If you drop a project and don't finish it, you're ashamed of it. There's some shame there. It's not worthy. You're not worthy. Okay. Then we have fear. And I'm going to go back and give you the antidotes, okay? Because I realize I didn't do that. I'm just describing the 5 emotions. Fear of what, you wonder? Dying in a plane crash? Sure, we all have fears. But the fear of being seen is what I'm talking about, because ultimately it is the fear of being shamed. And here we are, come full circle. In the Talmud, it is said, she, the great Talmud scholar, of which I am not, but I do know this quote from the Talmud: to shame someone is akin to murdering them. That's how bad shame feels. It is the worst possible, most paralyzing. That's why grandiosity is also so dangerous, because once that bubble pops, I've descended into suicidal ideation. Personally, I know people who followed through. I know two stand-up comics who, in their grandiosity, felt they had to make it. They had to be world famous. One of them gave herself 5 years, and if she didn't, she was going to off herself, and she followed through, because then her life wasn't worth living. She didn't fulfill her promise. Grandiosity is very dangerous. Okay, so let's go to the antidotes now. We have a few more minutes to talk about this. I mentioned shame, and the antidote to that being separation. So that's what allows you to put the shame down and continue to function. Finding a way to put it down and separate from it. And maybe I'll really quickly lead you through the mezzanine exercise. Okay. before I've got like 5 more minutes, and then I'll go through the other antidotes. So if you want to close your eyes for a second and imagine yourself in that big, big theater. First of all, feel yourself in that velvet seat. Feel it under you. Feel the floor of the mezzanine under your feet. And allow a moment to come to mind where you blew it. You blew it. It doesn't have to be a big traumatic thing. It could just be, oh, you put your foot in your mouth. You said something stupid, okay? Whatever comes to mind first. Now, the curtains part. Watch yourself go through that moment. Maybe you said something inadvertently racist. Maybe you committed a microaggression or something. No, really. We get mortified in these moments, and we're human, and it happens. Now, I want you to play it again. You are also the playwright here, so curtains closed. And what you're going to do now, you're going to replay it as a comedy. Curtains part, and just watch. You can even have a laugh track if you want. Watch yourself bumbling through this situation. And you're separate. You're up in the mezzanine. You're safe. You know, the theater, you go to the theater to feel, but you know you're safe. Lastly, play it again. And this time, watch yourself doing what would have been the appropriate thing. Perhaps it was keeping your mouth shut. Who knows? But just allow yourself saying or doing nothing that would have been a better choice. And just watch that. And now open your eyes. You've just done some work. You've just done some rewiring of your neurocircuitry and separated from that little bit of trauma, that little bit of shame. A very powerful exercise. That's separation. Now, grandiosity, the antidote, I'm afraid, is humility. And people hear that word and go, ick. Myself included, until I read Lewis Carroll's definition of it, which is, humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking about yourself less. So if you are, whatever it is, your grandiosity is triggered by your envy or whatever's going, and you're just in a dark place around it, what is it you're trying to do? Put your focus out. Put your focus on what you're trying to create. See, that's the difference between ambition and grandiosity. Ambition isn't thinking about, the person's not thinking about themselves. They're thinking about what they want to create. Ambition is very good. Right? So let's move on because we only have a couple minutes. Grandiosity, envy, the antidote to both, as I kind of inferred before, that's my life you're living, or, ooh, I want to get inside your skin, is enoughness. That's the antidote. Remembering you are enough. No, somebody else isn't living your life. You actually thought you could predict what your life could be, and you were wrong. Everybody is. Enoughness. And meditation is a great tool to get back in touch with that. And this isn't, I don't have time to get into a meditation, but knowing that just coming back to the breath gives you that sense of enoughness is very powerful. Boredom, antidote is becoming. Be, first you have to have that enoughness, and then come back to the work. And the way you do that is to remember why. Maybe go back to that epiphanic moment when you first conceived of what it was. Now, that doesn't mean putting away a novel in a drawer for 6 months is a bad thing, because sometimes you have to let your subconscious dwell on it. But then, at some point, you want to give yourself a deadline to come back to the work. And finally, fear. The pause. We are at 40 minutes. But no, I'm not talking about fight, flight, freeze, fawn. I'm talking about pause. If you're afraid, pause. Because when you have that pause, you have choice. I would go into this more deeply, but you can actually get my book through the link tree that I put in this post, and to read more deeply about this concept of the 5 emotions. And you can reach me through there, and there's a free gift you can get through there, so I hope you do all that. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to enjoying what everybody else has to present. So thank you so much, and have a great day.